Chapter 31. The Count had not lied to Albert when he refused his invitation to dinner on the grounds that he was expecting a visit from an Italian major. The clock had just struck 7. Bertuccio, following his orders, had left for the Count's house in Auteuil 2 hours earlier. A carriage stopped in front of the Count's Paris residence and deposited a man of about 52 years of age. This man's small, angular head, white hair, and thick gray mustache made him easily recognizable to Baptistin, who had received a precise description of the visitor in advance and was waiting for him in the vestibule. The stranger was introduced into the most modest salon. The Count was waiting for him there and stepped forward to meet him with an affable air. "Welcome, sir," he said. "I was expecting you." "Really? Are you sure I'm the one you were expecting, Excellency?" "Of course. But we can make sure if you like." "Oh, as long as you're sure I'm the one you were expecting, that's good enough for me." The stranger seemed to be slightly uneasy. "Just the same, let's make sure," said Monte Cristo. "Let's see now. You're the Marquis Bartholomew Cavalcanti, aren't you?" "Bartholomew Cavalcanti," repeated the stranger joyfully. "Yes, that's right." "Ex-major in the Austrian service." "Was I a major?" asked the old soldier timidly. "Yes, a major. That's the name we give in France to the rank you held in Italy." "That's fine with me, you know. Besides, you were sent to me by someone?" "Yes, by that excellent Abbé Busoni." "That's right," cried the major happily. "And you have a letter." "Here it is." Monte Cristo took the letter and read it. "Yes, that's right," he said. "Major Cavalcanti, a worthy nobleman of Lucca, descendant of the Cavalcanti of Florence, possessing an income of 500,000. "Did you say 500,000? asked the major. "Yes, it's written here in black and white, and it must be true because no one knows more about the great fortunes of Europe than the Abbé Busoni." "Then it must be 500,000, but I had no idea it was so much." Monte Cristo continued reading. "He lacks only one thing for his happiness, to find his beloved son, who was carried off in his childhood either by the enemies of his noble family or by gypsies. I have given him the hope, Count, that you can help him find this son for whom he had been vainly searching for 15 years. The major looked at Monte Cristo with an indefinable expression of anxiety. "I can help you find him," said the Count. "Then the letter is true?" "Did you doubt it, Major?" "No, not for a single instant. A serious man like the Abbé Busoni would never say such things jokingly. But you haven't finished reading the letter, Excellency." "Oh, yes, there's a postscript. In order to save Major Cavalcanti the trouble of transferring his funds, I am sending him 2,000 francs for his traveling expenses and a credit on you for the 48,000 francs you owe me." The major followed the reading of this postscript with visible anxiety. "Very well," was the Count's only comment. "Then the postscript. What about it?" "Did you receive it as favorably as the rest of the letter?" "Certainly. The Abbé Busoni and I maintain an account between us. I'm not sure whether it's precisely 48,000 francs I owe him now, but we don't quibble over a few thousand francs one way or the other." "Then you'll advance me the 48,000 francs?" "Whenever you like." The major's eyes opened wide in astonishment. "Please have a seat, Major," said Monte Cristo. "I don't know what's the matter with me. I've kept you standing here for a quarter of an hour." The major drew up an armchair and sat down. "So, Major," said the Count, "you live in Lucca. You're rich, you're of noble birth, you enjoy the respect and admiration of your fellow men, and only one thing is lacking to make you completely happy." "Only one thing, Excellency. And that one thing is to find your son again." "Yes, but that's very important to me," said the worthy major, raising his eyes and making an effort to sigh. "Now, Major Cavalcanti, tell me about this beloved son. I've heard it said that you had remained a bachelor." "People thought so, and you yourself supported the belief. There was a sin of your youth that you wanted to keep hidden, not for your own sake, a man is above such things, but for the sake of your son's poor mother." "Yes, for the sake of his poor mother." "She belonged to one of the noblest families of Italy, didn't she?" "A patrician of Faisal, Count, a patrician of Faisal." "And what was her name?" "You want to know her name?" "Oh, it's useless for you to tell me," said the Count. "I know it already." "You know everything, Count," said the major, bowing. "Her name was Oliva Corsinari, wasn't it?" "That's right. Oliva Corsinari." "And you finally married her despite family opposition, didn't you?" "Yes, I finally did." "Have you brought your documents?" What documents? Asked the major. The certificate of your marriage to Oliva Corsinari and your son's birth certificate. His name is Andrea, isn't it? I think so. You think so? I'm afraid to say for sure. It's been so long since I saw him last. That's true, said Monte Cristo. But do you have the documents? I'm sorry, but no one told me I'd need them, and I neglected to take them with me. Are they necessary? Indispensable. Not having them might make him miss some magnificent marriage. In France, it's not sufficient, as it is in Italy, to go to a priest and say, we love each other, unite us. In France, there is also a civil ceremony for which one must furnish proof of one's identity. Fortunately, however, I have the documents I mentioned. You have them? Yes. Wonderful! Exclaimed the major, who was beginning to fear that the absence of the documents might raise some difficulty with regard to the 48,000 francs. I would never have thought you had them. One can't think of everything. Fortunately, the Abbé Busoni thought of it for you. What an admirable man. He sent them to you. Here they are. Give them to your son and tell him to take great care of them. I'm sure you realize the value of these documents. I regard them as priceless. Now about the young man's mother. My God, exclaimed the major, do we need her too? No, Major, replied Monte Cristo. Besides, isn't she? Yes, of course, she paid her tribute to nature. Yes, alas. So I was told. She died 10 years ago, and I still mourn her loss, Count, said the major, drawing a handkerchief from his pocket and wiping his eyes. Console yourself, Major. We're all mortal, but now that we've refreshed your memory, you must have guessed by now that I've been saving a surprise for you. A pleasant surprise? Ah, I see it impossible to deceive the eye and the heart of a father. You already sense that he's here. Who's here? Your child, your son, your Andrea. Very good, very good. I understand your emotion, said Monte Cristo, and I realize that I must give you time to compose yourself. Also, I want to prepare the young man for this much-desired interview, for I assume he's as impatient as you are. I'm sure he is. Well then, in less than a quarter of an hour he'll walk through that door. And by the way, said the major, as you know, I took only 2,000 francs with me, and you need money, don't you? Of course you do. Here's 8,000 francs. I still owe you 40. The major's eyes gleamed. Would you like a receipt, Excellency? He asked. You can give me a receipt for everything later when I've given you the whole amount. Such precautions are useless between honest men. Yes, of course, between honest men. And now would you allow me to make a suggestion? I'd be grateful to you. It would do no harm if you were to stop wearing that coat. Really, said the major, looking at the garment with a certain affection. Yes, it's still fashionable in Italy, but elegant though it may be, it's been out of style in Paris for quite some time. That's a shame, said the major, but what shall I wear? You'll find a coat in your trunks. In my trunks? I brought only a suitcase. That's all you took with you, but you sent your trunks on ahead. They're now in the Hotel de Prince in the Rue Richelieu, which is where you reserve your lodgings. I assume you had the foresight to instruct your valet to pack your trunks with everything you'll need. You'll wear your uniform for important occasions. That makes a good impression. And don't forget your medals. Very good, said the major, passing from one dazzling surprise to another. And now, Monsieur Cavalcanti, said the count, prepare to see your son Andrea again. Bowing graciously to the enraptured major, Monte Cristo walked out of the room. In the neighboring salon was a rather elegantly dressed young man who had arrived half an hour earlier. Baptistin had no difficulty in recognizing him. He was clearly the tall young man whose blond hair, red beard, and black eyes had been described by Monte Cristo. When the count entered the salon, the young man was sprawled out on a sofa, absent-mindedly tapping his boot with a gold-headed cane. On seeing the count, he leaped to his feet and asked, Are you the Count of Monte Cristo? Yes, and have I the honor of speaking to Viscount Andrea Cavalcanti? Viscount Andrea Cavalcanti, repeated the young man nonchalantly. I believe you have a letter of introduction for me. I didn't mention it because the signature seems so strange to me. Sinbad the Sailor, isn't it? Yes. He's a friend of mine, an Englishman. He's very rich and eccentric, almost to the point of madness. His real name is Lord Wilmore. Ah, then, he's the same Englishman who... Very well. I'm at your service, Count. If what you tell me is true, said the Count, smiling, I hope you'll be kind enough to give me a few details about yourself and your family. I'd be glad to, Count, said the young man with a volubility that proved the soundness of his memory. "I am, as you said, Viscount Andrea Cavalcanti, son of Major Bartolomeo Cavalcanti, a descendant of the Cavalcanti family whose name is inscribed in the Golden Book of Florence. At the age of 5, I was carried off by a treacherous tutor, so that I haven't seen my father for 15 years. I've been trying to find him ever since I reached the age of reason, but in vain. Finally, this letter from your friend Sinbad informed me that he was in Paris and authorized me to address myself to you to obtain news of him." "That's all very interesting," said the Count. "You were right to come to me, because your father is here at this very moment." Since his entrance into the salon, the Count had not taken his eyes off the young man, who had admired the self-assurance of his gaze. He had admired the self-assurance of his gaze and the firmness of his voice. But on hearing the words, "Your father is here at this very moment," young Andrea started and cried out, My father? My father is here?" "Yes," replied the Count, "your father, Major Bartolomeo Cavalcanti." The young man's terrified expression vanished instantly. "Yes, of course," he said. "Major Bartolomeo Cavalcanti. You say my dear father is here now, Count?" "Yes, you'll see him in a moment. He's a little stiff and pompous, perhaps, but that's because he's been a soldier for so long. Besides, a great fortune makes it easy to overlook many things." "My father is rich, then?" "A millionaire, an income of 500,000 francs." "In that case," said the young man anxiously, "will I find myself in a pleasant situation?" "Extremely pleasant. He's going to give you an allowance of 50,000 francs a year for as long as you stay in Paris." "Does he plan to stay in Paris for long?" "His duties won't allow him to stay for more than a few days." "Oh, dear father," said Andrea, clearly delighted by this prompt departure. "Well," said Monte Cristo, pretending to have misinterpreted the tone in which these words were spoken, "I won't keep you waiting any longer. Step into the next room and you'll find your father." Andrea bowed deeply to the Count and entered the adjoining salon. When he had gone, the Count touched a hidden spring, and a painting on the wall slid aside to reveal an opening enabling him to see into the next room. Andrea closed the door behind him and walked toward the Major, who stood up as soon as he heard his footsteps. "Father," said Andrea loudly enough for the Count to hear him behind the closed door, "is it really you?" "Yes, my son," said the Major gravely. "What good fortune to see each other again after so many years of separation," continued Andrea, still looking toward the door. "Yes, it was a long separation. And we'll never part again?" "I'm afraid so, my son. You've come to regard France as your second home, haven't you?" "To tell the truth," said the young man, "I'd be heartbroken if I had to leave Paris. And I couldn't live anywhere except Lucca. I'll go back to Italy as soon as possible. But before you go, father, I'm sure you'll give me the documents that will enable me to prove my ancestry." "Yes, I came here expressly to give them to you. Here they are." Andrea seized the documents avidly and examined them with a rapidity and an assurance that indicated a practiced eye. Looking at the Major with a strange smile, he said in excellent Italian, "Aren't there any prisons in Italy?" "What do you mean?" "In France, a forgery like this, dear father, would cost you at least 5 years in Toulon." "I beg your pardon," said the Major, endeavoring to assume an air of majesty. How much are you getting for being my father?" asked Andrea, pressing the Major's arm. The Major started to speak. "Shh," said Andrea, lowering his voice. "Here, I'll set you an example of confidence. I'm getting 50,000 francs a year to be your son." The Major looked around anxiously. "Oh, don't worry, we're alone," said Andrea. "Besides, we're speaking Italian." "All right, then," said the Major. "I'm getting 50,000 francs in a lump sum." "Monsieur Cavalcanti, do you believe in fairy tales?" "I didn't before, but now I'm forced to." "Do you think I can believe in the Count's promises, then?" "Yes, but we'll have to play our parts well, since they insist on my being your father." "Who are they?" "I have no idea, whoever it was who wrote to us." "You got a letter?" "Yes." "From whom?" "From a certain Abbé Busoni." "Do you know him?" "I never laid eyes on him." "What was in the letter?" "You won't tell anyone?" "Of course not. Our interests are the same." "Read it, then." The Major handed a letter to Andrea, who read it aloud. "You are poor, and a wretched old age awaits you. Would you like to become, if not rich, at least independent? If so, leave for Paris immediately. Go and see the Count of Monte Cristo at 30 Avenue de Champs-Élysées, and ask him to introduce you to the son whom you had by the Marquise de Courcenari, who was taken away from you at the age of 5. Your son's name is Andrea Cavalcanti. In case you should have any doubt about my intention to be of service to you, you will find enclosed a check for 2,000 francs and a letter of introduction to the Count of Monte Cristo, with whom I have opened a credit of 48,000 francs for you. Be at the Count's house on May 26th at 7 o'clock in the evening. Abbe Busoni." "I received a letter almost like this one," said Andrea. "From the Abbe Busoni?" "No, from Lord Wilmore, an Englishman who goes by the name of Sinbad the Sailor. Here's the letter." The major read, "You are poor, and you have only a wretched future ahead of you. Would you like to be free and rich and have an illustrious name? If so, go to see the Count of Monte Cristo, 30 Avenue de Champs-Élysées in Paris on May 26th at 7 o'clock in the evening, and ask him for your father. You are the son of Major Bartholomew Cavalcanti and the Marquise Oliva Corsinari, as you will see from the documents which the major will give to you, and which will enable you to present yourself under that name to Paris society. As for your rank, an allowance of 50,000 francs a year will enable you to maintain it properly. Enclosed is a check for 5,000 francs and a letter of introduction to the Count of Monte Cristo, whom I have instructed to take care of all of your needs. Sinbad the Sailor." "That's wonderful," said the major. "Have you seen the Count?" "I just left him." Did he agree to everything?" "Everything." "Do you understand anything about all this?" "Nothing at all, but in any case, let's play a game to the end." "So be it. You'll see that I'm worthy to be your partner." "I haven't doubted that for an instant, my dear father." "You honor me, my dear son." The Count chose this moment to enter the salon. On hearing the sound of his footsteps, the two men drew themselves into each other's arms. "You seem to find your son according to your liking, Major," said the Count. "I'm overwhelmed with joy, Count." "And you, young man?" "Oh, Count, I'm bursting with happiness." "Oh, excellent," said the Count. "And now you may go, gentlemen." "When shall we have the honor of seeing you again, Count?" asked the Major. "Oh, yes, when shall we have that honor?" asked Andrea. "This Saturday, if you like. I'm having several people to dinner in my house at Auteuil, 28 Rue de la Fontaine." "At what time shall we come?" asked Andrea. "Toward 6:30, replied the Count. "We'll be there," said the Major, touching his hat. The two Cavalcanti men bowed to the Count and left. The Count went over to the window and watched them cross the courtyard arm in arm. "There go a pair of scoundrels," he thought. "What a shame they really aren't father and son."